The crimson moons of Zarian 7 cast long shadows across the desolate outpost as Kestra Vex moved like liquid death through the human settlement. Her obsidian armor absorbed the alien starlight, rendering her nearly invisible against the metallic structures. Every muscle in her lean, athletic frame was coiled with lethal precision, the product of 2 decades training in the Zephyrian war academies. Tonight, she would fulfill her sacred duty. Captain Jace Thorne's voice crackled through the comm system as he led his 4-man patrol around the perimeter. Sector 7 clear, moving to final checkpoint. His weathered face bore the scars of countless battles, and his steel-gray eyes constantly scanned for threats. At 35, he'd survived more alien encounters than most soldiers twice his age. Kestra's hand tightened around the grip of her ceremonial blade, the Morthak, forged from meteoric ore and blessed by the high priestesses of Zephyr Prime. Its curved edge gleamed with an otherworldly blue luminescence, sharp enough to cut through powered armor like parchment. This weapon had ended the lives of 47 humans. Tonight would make 48. She dropped silently from the communications tower as Thorne's squad rounded the corner. The first 2 soldiers fell before they could raise their weapons, her blade finding the gaps in their combat suits with surgical precision. The third managed a warning shout before her fist connected with his temple, dropping him unconscious. Thorne spun around, his plasma rifle already charging, but Kestra was faster. She launched herself through the air, her blade arcing, toward his throat in a killing stroke that would have decapitated a lesser warrior. But Thorne wasn't lesser. He threw himself backward, the Morthak missing his jugular by millimeters, instead carving a deep gash from his left temple to his jaw. Blood sprayed across the blade's luminescent surface as he hit the ground hard, his rifle skittering away. Across the metal grating, another dead human, Kestra whispered in her native tongue, raising the blade for the finishing blow. Then the Morthak began to burn. Azure flames erupted along its edge where Thorne's blood had touched the ancient metal. The fire raced up the blade and into Kestra's hand, sending shockwaves of agony through her nervous system. She screamed, a sound of pure anguish that echoed across the empty outpost. The mystical fire spread through her veins like molten metal, rewriting something fundamental in her genetic code. Ancient Zephyrian runes blazed to life across her dark skin, pulsing in rhythm with Thorne's heartbeat. The Veltar Mor, the blood bond of the ancients, was awakening after centuries of dormancy. As the flames faded, Kestra found herself on her knees beside the wounded human, her hands moving without conscious direction to stem the flow of blood from his face. Every instinct screamed at her to finish what she'd started, but her body refused to obey. What did you do to me?" she gasped, her accent thick with confusion and rage. Thorne's eyes opened, focusing on her with surprising clarity despite his injury. "I should be asking you that question." He tried to sit up, and Kestra's hands immediately moved to support him. Another involuntary action that made her recoil in horror. The bond was complete. The predator had become the protector, bound by laws older than memory to serve the very enemy she'd sworn to destroy. Kestra paced the cramped confines of the abandoned mining facility like a caged predator, her movements sharp with barely contained fury. The mystical runes along her arms pulsed with a faint blue glow whenever she strayed too far from Thorne. Invisible chains tethering her to the human she'd been bred to hate. "Explain this to me again," Thorne said, pressing a medical patch against his wounded face. The deep gash had stopped bleeding, but it would leave a permanent scar, a reminder of their violent first encounter. "The Veltar Mor is an ancient binding." Kestra spat, her exotic accent making the alien words sound like a curse. "When the blood of enemies mingles on consecrated steel, the spirits of my ancestors forge an unbreakable bond. The warrior becomes sworn protector of their intended victim." She slammed her fist against the metal wall. "It was meant to prevent blood feuds, not chain me to human scum." "Charming." Thorne winced as he adjusted the patch. "And there's no way to break it?" "Death." The word hung between them like a blade. "When one of us dies, the other follows within moments. Our life forces are now intertwined." The sound of approaching engines cut through their conversation. Through the facility's grimy windows, they could see the lights of both human and Zephyrian, Searchcraft converging on their position. They're hunting us both, Thorne observed grimly. Your people will see you as a traitor, and mine will assume I've been compromised. Kestra's jaw clenched. The Zephyrian High Command would rather see me dead than bonded to a human, and your military will dissect us both to understand the bond. Another wave of mystical compulsion washed over her as Thorne stood too quickly, nearly stumbling. Without thinking, she moved to steady him, her hands gripping his shoulders with surprising gentleness. Don't, she whispered, though whether she was speaking to him or herself wasn't clear. For a moment they stood frozen in that intimate proximity. Kestra could smell his scent, distinctly human, but not unpleasant. Warm copper from his blood, the clean efficiency of military soap, and something else entirely masculine that made her pulse quicken, in ways that had nothing to do with the mystical bond. Thorne's gray eyes studied her face with an intensity that made her want to retreat. You're not what I expected from the stories. What did you expect? A monster. His hand rose unconsciously toward her cheek before he caught himself. But you're just afraid. The vulnerability in those words hit her like a physical blow. I am Kestra Vex, First Blade of the Crimson Legion. I do not know fear. Everyone knows fear, he said softly. The question is what we do with it. The approaching engines grew louder. They had minutes before both armies would breach the facility. Need to move, Thorne said, gathering his scattered equipment. There's a neutral trading post in the Andorian sector. 3 days' journey if we can reach the transport hub. I cannot leave Zephyrian space, Kestra protested. It would be treason. Staying here means death for both of us. The bond won't let you abandon me, and I can't survive without you now. He met her eyes steadily. We're in this together, whether we like it or not. As if responding to his words, the runes on her skin flared brighter. The mystical connection between them hummed with shared necessity. Two warriors bound by destiny, forced to trust each other to survive. The first explosion rocked the facility as Zephyrian plasma cannons began their assault. In the distance, human voices shouted orders in military code. This way, Kestra said, her tactical training overriding her emotional turmoil. She led him toward the mining tunnels that honeycombed the planet's crust. Stay close. If we're separated by more than 50 meters, the bond will cause us both excruciating pain. As they disappeared into the darkness together, Kestra tried to ignore the way Thorne's presence beside her felt less like a chain and more like a lifeline. The warrior who had never known anything but solitary strength was learning what it meant to need another soul to survive. Behind them, the facility erupted in flames as two armies searched for their missing prizes, never suspecting their quarry had vanished into the planet's hidden depths. The transport freighter Nexus Runner shuddered as it broke through Zerion 7's atmosphere, its aging engines straining against the planet's gravity well. Kestra and Thorne had stowed away in the cargo hold among crates of processed minerals. There, bodies pressed together in the cramped space behind shipping containers. For 6 hours they'd remained motionless as checkpoint scanners swept the vessel. Kestra's enhanced hearing tracked every footstep of the crew above, while Thorne's steady breathing against her neck sent involuntary shivers down her spine, sensations she'd never experienced in her sterile warrior's existence. Clear for hyperspace. Jump. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom. As the ship's artificial gravity stabilized, they finally separated. Though the mystical bond kept them within arm's reach, Kestra immediately missed the warmth of his body against hers, a weakness that both confused and angered her. We have 48 hours before we reach the Andorian station, Thorne said, checking his chronometer. Both our governments will have alerts posted by then. Kestra examined their meager supplies, emergency rations, basic medical kit, and her Morthak, which still hummed with residual mystical energy. Tell me about your world, she said unexpectedly. Thorne raised an eyebrow. Trying to understand your enemy? Trying to understand the man I'm bound to protect? The admission slipped out before she could stop it. He was quiet for a long moment, studying her face in the dim cargo hold lighting. I grew up on New Terra, farming colony in the Outer Rim. Lost my parents to a Zephyrian raid when I was 16. Kestra's stomach clenched with unexpected guilt. I may have been part of that campaign. Probably. His voice held no accusation, only weary acceptance. I joined the military to fight your people. Spent 20 years convinced you were all heartless killers. He gestured toward her mystical runes which pulsed gently in the darkness. Now I'm magically bonded to one of you, and you're more human than half the soldiers I've served with. We are not so different, Kestra admitted reluctantly. I was taken from my birth parents at age 5, trained to see humans as vermin to be exterminated. The instructors showed us footage of human atrocities, taught us you were incapable of honor or compassion. Yet here you are keeping me alive. The bond compels me. No. Thorn's hand caught hers, his thumb tracing the glowing runes on her wrist. I felt the bond too. It creates connection, not compassion. What you did, back at the facility, tending my wound, choosing to flee rather than fight, that was you, not mystical compulsion. The touch of his skin against hers sent electricity racing through her nervous system. Kestra had never been touched with gentleness before. Only the harsh contact of combat training and medical examinations. This simple caress awakened something, primal and terrifying in her warrior's heart. You should not touch me, she whispered, but made no move to pull away. Why? Because I am your enemy. Because this bond is temporary madness. Because... Her voice faltered as he cupped her scarred cheek with surprising tenderness. Because you're afraid of what you're feeling? The cargo hold's emergency lighting cast dancing shadows across their faces as the freighter jumped to hyperspace. In the sudden silence that followed the engine's shift to FTL drive, Kestra could hear only their synchronized breathing and the rapid beating of her own heart. I have never felt desire, she confessed, her voice barely audible. It was trained out of me, suppressed by chemical conditioning. But with you... Thorn's lips were only inches from hers now. The bond is awakening parts of yourself you never knew existed. When their mouths finally met, it was not with the desperate hunger of physical need, but with the careful exploration of two souls discovering something sacred and forbidden. Kestra's enhanced senses cataloged every detail, the warmth of his breath, the slight roughness of his jaw, the way he trembled when her fingers traced the fresh scars she'd given him. They made love among the shipping crates with a tenderness that defied their circumstances, warrior and soldier finding solace in each other's arms as they hurtled through hyperspace toward an uncertain future. For the first time in her life, Kestra understood what the ancient poets meant when they wrote of two becoming one. Afterward, as they lay entwined in the aftermath of passion, the mystical runes on her skin glowed brighter than ever before. No longer marks of bondage, but symbols of connection deeper than either had imagined possible. Whatever happens at the station, Thorn murmured against her hair. This wasn't just the bond talking. Kestra smiled against his chest, an expression that would have shocked her instructors. For the first time since the binding, she wasn't fighting her destiny. She was embracing it. The Andorian trading station hung like a metallic spider in the void between star systems, its rotating sections generating artificial gravity for the thousands of beings who called the neutral territory home. Kestra and Thorn moved through the crowded marketplace corridors, hoods drawn low to hide their distinctive features. There, Thorn pointed toward a small information booth staffed by a blue-skinned Andorian merchant. Rexus deals in more than trade goods. He's got access to restricted archives. The merchant's 6 eyes studied them with obvious suspicion as they approached. Credits first, questions second, Rexus wheezed through his breathing apparatus. Thorn slid a payment chip across the counter. We need information about Zephyrian blood bonds, historical records, ritual specifics, everything you have. Rexus's eyes widened as he recognized what they were. A bonded pair, haven't seen one in over 3 centuries. He activated a privacy shield around his booth. What you seek will cost more than credits, human. Both your governments have bounties on your heads. Name your price, Kestra said, her hand moving instinctively to her concealed blade. Safe passage to the outer rim when this is over. My people have been persecuted by both your species for staying neutral. Rexes pulled up holographic displays of ancient texts. The Veltar Moor was created by the Treaty of Crimson Stars. Peace accord signed by your ancestors 400 years ago. Kestra stared at the alien script in shock. That's impossible. The Treaty of Crimson Stars was a myth, a story told to younglings. No myth. Rexes continued, scrolling through pages of documentation. Your peoples were locked in a devastating war that threatened to consume both civilizations. The blood bond was designed as the ultimate diplomatic tool. When warriors from opposing sides were bound, it created perfect ambassadors who understood both cultures intimately. Thorn leaned forward, studying the holographic text. Why did it stop being used? Fear, the merchant replied simply. Leaders on both sides realized that bonded pairs often chose love over loyalty to their birth species. The treaties were buried, the rituals forbidden. Your bond activated because your blade was one of the few remaining ceremonial weapons still carrying the original enchantments. A commotion outside the booth drew their attention. Through the privacy shield's distortion, they could see human and Zephyrian forces moving through the marketplace, their search patterns growing tighter. They've found us, Kestra whispered, her mystical runes beginning to pulse with warning. Rexes quickly downloaded the files to a data crystal. There's one more thing you need to know. The bond can be broken, but only through the Korthani ritual. One of you must willingly sacrifice their life force to sever the connection. Or, Thorn asked, though his expression suggested he already knew. Or you embrace it fully. The final bonding ritual will make the connection permanent and grant you both enhanced abilities, shared strength, telepathic communication, extended lifespans. Rexes handed them the crystal. But once completed, you become something new. No longer purely human or Zephyrian, but a fusion of both. The sound of weapons being charged echoed through the marketplace as soldiers from both armies began surrounding the information district. We need to move, Thorn said, but Kestra caught his arm. Wait. Her violet eyes searched his face desperately. If we do this, if we complete the bonding, there's no going back. We'll be outcast from both our peoples forever. And if we don't? One of us dies to break the bond, or we spend our lives running from everyone we've ever known. The sound of approaching boots grew louder. Through gaps in the privacy shield, they could see the distinctive armor of both species' elite forces converging on their location. Thorn cupped her face in his hands, his thumb tracing the scar he'd given her that first night, now a mark of connection rather than violence. I've spent 20 years fighting a war based on lies and propaganda. These past days with you have shown me more truth than 2 decades of military service. The ritual is irreversible, Kestra warned, even as her heart raced with desperate hope. We'll be bound in every way, mind, body, and soul. Our children will carry both bloodlines. Children? Thorn's eyes widened at the implication. The complete bonding makes reproduction possible between our species. We would be creating something entirely new. She pressed her forehead against his. I never wanted a family, never imagined I could love someone enough to. Then let's give both our peoples something they've never had, Thorn interrupted, his voice fierce with determination. A bridge instead of a chasm. As the first energy blasts shattered the privacy shield around them, Kestra made her choice. She pulled out her Morthak, its blade blazing with renewed mystical fire, and began the ancient chant that would bind them beyond death itself. The final battle was about to begin, not for their freedom, but for their right to choose love over hate, unity over division. The central plaza of Andorian Station erupted into chaos as both armies converged on Kestra and Thorn's position. Energy blasts scorched the air around them while terrified civilians fled in all directions, seeking shelter behind market stalls and cargo containers. Morthak Velsaran Kothai, Kestra chanted, her ceremonial blade blazing like a star as she began the final bonding ritual. The mystical runes covering her body erupted into brilliant azure flames that danced across her skin without burning. Kestravex, surrender immediately. Commander Zephron's voice boomed through amplifiers as Zephyrian shock troops took positions around the plaza. "You have violated every oath of service to the Empire." From the opposite direction, General Morrison's human forces advanced with weapons trained. "Captain Thorne, step away from the alien combatant. That's a direct order." Thorne drew his plasma rifle, standing back to back with Kestra as she continued the ancient chant. "With respect, General, I'm following a higher calling now." The mystical energy flowing from Kestra's blade began to envelop them both, creating a shimmering barrier of pure light. As the bonding ritual progressed, Thorne felt his consciousness expanding, touching Kestra's mind in ways that transcended physical sensation. "I can feel your thoughts," her voice whispered directly into his mind. "And I can feel your heart," he replied through their growing telepathic link. "You're terrified, but not of dying. I'm terrified of hope, that this impossible thing we found might actually change everything." The first wave of attackers opened fire simultaneously. Energy blasts from both armies converged on their position, only to be absorbed harmlessly by the mystical barrier surrounding the bonded pair. The absorbed energy fed back into the ritual, accelerating their transformation. "Impossible," Commander Zephyrin hissed. "No single warrior can withstand concentrated fire from—" His words died as Kestra and Thorne moved in perfect synchronization, their enhanced bond allowing them to fight as a single organism with 4 arms and 2 minds. Kestra's Morthak became a blur of lethal precision, while Thorne's rifle found targets with inhuman accuracy, each covering the other's weaknesses instinctively. But they weren't fighting to kill. Every shot was carefully placed to disable. Every blade stroke designed to incapacitate rather than execute. The bonding ritual was teaching them a new way of combat, one that sought to preserve life rather than destroy it. "Veltar Mor Koshan Dai," Kestra completed the final phrase of the ritual. The mystical energy surrounding them exploded outward in a wave of pure force that knocked every combatant in the plaza to their knees. When the light faded, 2 figures stood at the center of the destruction, no longer quite human or Zephyrian, but something magnificently new. Kestra's dark skin now held subtle patterns of silver that complemented the azure runes, while Thorne's eyes had acquired flecks of violet that matched hers perfectly. They moved with fluid grace that spoke of shared strength and unified purpose. "Look at them," General Morrison whispered in amazement. "They're beautiful." The bonded pair approached the 2 commanding officers, their presence radiating an aura of peace that seemed to calm the aggressive impulses of everyone nearby. "Commanders," Thorne spoke, his voice carrying newfound authority, "we offer you something your species have never possessed, the truth about your shared heritage." Kestra activated the data Crystal Rexus had given them, projecting holographic records of the Treaty of Crimson Stars for all to see. 4 centuries ago, our peoples were one, children of the same stellar nursery, separated by migration patterns and evolved differently on distant worlds. The blood bond exists because we were never truly enemies, only lost siblings who forgot their common origin. The historical records painted a picture that shattered decades of propaganda from both sides. Humans and Zephyrians weren't alien species, locked in eternal conflict. They were evolutionary cousins whose cultures had diverged over millennia of separation. "The war has been based on manufactured hatred," Kestra continued, her hand finding Thorne's as their bond pulsed with shared conviction. "We propose something radical, a new alliance between our peoples with bonded pairs serving as living bridges between worlds." Commander Zephyron struggled to his feet, his expression torn between duty and dawning wonder. "Even if what you say is true, the High Command will never accept—" "The High Command will have little choice," interrupted a new voice. Rexus emerged from the crowd of observers, flanked by representatives from a dozen neutral species. "Word of this event is already spreading across the galaxy. Both your governments are being pressured by the Galactic Council to explain why they've been suppressing evidence of shared ancestry." General Morrison lowered his weapon slowly. "What exactly are you proposing?" Thorne and Kestra exchanged a look of perfect understanding through their telepathic bond. "A new embassy," Thorne announced. jointly staffed by bonded pairs who can navigate both cultures with perfect fluency. Peace negotiated not through politicians but through love. As if responding to their words, other couples began to emerge from the crowd. Humans and Zephyrians who had found each other in the chaos of war, their own bonds waiting to be awakened. The old ways end here, Kestra declared, raising her still glowing blade in salute. Today begins the age of unity. 6 months later, the first embassy of bonded pairs opened on the neutral world of Haven Prime. Captain Jace Thorne and Commander Kestra Vex served as its first ambassadors, their love story having sparked a revolution that transformed 2 civilizations. Their first child, born with silver eyes that held flecks of both azure and violet, would grow up in a galaxy where the word enemy had become obsolete, replaced by the far more powerful concept of family. The blood that had once divided them now flowed together, creating something infinitely stronger than either species had achieved alone. The end.